So how would you define yourself as a leader?
So on one hand, you can say I'm a bit of a casual leader because we spend a lot of time laughing and joking, and I tease people quite a bit, so they have to get used to that.
Mhm.
On the other hand, I'm maybe because I'm old school, I'm not hands off. Like I'm a pretty hands on leader. Maybe because all my life I've been taught you need to know your file. So if you come in and you have one of your team presenting, if you don't know the answers, then you're in trouble too. So I've always been taught really need to know what's going on. So maybe some of my team find that frustrating. I would say inclusive to the extent that I do listen to my team, but I guess maybe it's also old school as well. I know that it comes down to me and it's on me. So if the decision has to be like, no matter what happens in my sort of my group, if it's an error happens, it's on me. If a decision has to be, it's on me. So I take a lot of pride in that. The other thing that I think is I'm inclusive from a listening standpoint, but also a sharing standpoint. I was taught really early on in my life that people tend to perform better or enjoy themselves more when they know the big picture. So a lot of times I will share a lot more with my team than they actually need to know, but it's just so that they know what's going on in the rest of the organization and they kind of have a context of what they're doing.
Mhm. Now, in terms of your plan, did you your success, did you plan it? Did you have a written plan? What does your journey look like?
So I'm the most anal retentive, detailed, process oriented person I know in everything except for my career.
Hmm.
I've never planned anything in my career. Everything I went was it was a one lucky step after another, sort of right place, right time, wonderful bosses, people who had confidence in me, but not one single moment was planned. So just blessed.
Hmm. Now, was there ever a challenging obstacle that you faced in your career that you feel has really shaped you as a leader?
Um, I don't know if it was an obstacle per se. Um, I would say that in terms of what shaped me, I guess there's a whole bunch of things, but in terms of obstacles, I wouldn't say there's too many. I've been very lucky. I've been very lucky overall. Um, what shaped me was a couple things. Was one is I got trained as an accountant in Arthur Andersen, which you are too young to know about because it died way before you were born. But it was a great firm that really had extraordinary training and really pushed their people. So I love that.
Mhm.
My boss, who I had when I was working in the UK, she shaped my career the most because she taught me how to think of things and how to plan things and also how to push things. But really, all my roles from everything that I've done from being a tax accountant to what I do now has really, really shaped my career.
Mhm. Now, if you were to identify one key strength or attribute that is your greatest from a leadership perspective, what would that be?
Um, I think authenticity.
Mhm.
It's probably a bit of a double-edged sword for some people because I do tend to say what I think.
Mhm.
And in the organization I work at now, everybody finds me extraordinarily direct, while I sort of like I'm just saying it, right? So not everybody can handle it, but I think most people, even though I may not be saying everything perfectly, they know that what I'm saying is truthful to me.
Mhm. Now, if you were to go back 10 years in your career, is there a specific attribute or style that you've changed in your leadership approach?
I think over the last 10 years, I've definitely gained a lot of confidence.
Mhm.
And the thing that is hard when you're just starting out in your leadership career is to say, especially as women, is do I raise my hand? Do I say something? I'm not comfortable with this. Should I speak out loud? Should I wait? Am I the only person in the room who doesn't understand this? Right. So you're really just always question in your head. You're doubting yourself. And as I've gotten older, maybe because I care less what people think as well, I just say it. And I ask a question. I'm like, I'm not understanding that. I don't get that. Say that again so I can understand it. And I think with time, you do understand that one, people are not going to judge you because you don't understand. And two, it's okay if you don't understand. So
Mhm. Yeah. And I think that's great for people to hear that out loud as well, especially earlier in your careers.
totally, yeah. So
Now, what motivates you the most as a leader?
what motivates me? Adding value.
Hmm.
Um, and it's different. and it's not just, being able to do your job well, because that's cool. But being at the table when important decisions are being made, doing something that's important. So it
Mhm.
could be something really small in which you have a large role, or it could be something really huge in which you have a tiny role, but just something that you feel like you're contributing, and then that you also feel valued, that that people look to you and say, hey, she actually added something today. So I like that.
Now, what would be your proudest moment in your career or just as a leader that you look back to?
One of the things that I am proud of is that when I looked back at all my different jobs, and there have been many,
Mhm.
I there is at least one, probably more than one person, either a team and a boss, who I keep in touch with. So all my jobs, I've kept in touch with people from each one of my jobs. And so I love that, because it was more than a job. In other words, it was more than just a role. Like, you made real connections, and you could keep them, because a lot of times you're friends when you're in a particular role, but then when you leave through no fault of anybody, it's because you no longer have that thing in common that you used to have in common. So when you don't work with the same company, you move on. But I've managed to find wonderful people that I look back, and for some reason they want to keep in touch with me too. So it's been fun. And it's not just emails. Like, before this, we actually, got together, meals, drinks, all those things. So I love that.
Now, for all great leaders, their teams are critical to their success. So,
Mhm.
what is your style of motivating your teams? And do you feel like it's changing during the pandemic?
Um, I don't think well, maybe it's changed a little bit during the pandemic. So to motivate people, one thing you have to be is flexible. So not everybody gets motivated by the same thing. So some of my team, they love the detail in terms of they go through every task that they're working on, blah, blah, blah. Others just go through the highlights. Others are like, these are the things I need your advice on. So you just need to meet them where they are. And that's how you can motivate them as well, is by encouraging them. You have the normal, I think the table stake stuff that I think, Sarah, you've probably heard a million times. You got to give them the right recognition. You've got to give them the training. You've got to give them like all that normal stuff. But
Mhm.
on top of it is that flexibility to manage them the way they want to be managed.
Mhm.
And I think what I just said earlier in terms of providing that big picture, most people that I've worked with actually like to hear more than what they need to hear, right? They like to know more about their job than just their job, right? So I think they like that. In COVID, it's been a bit of a balance, because at the beginning, everyone said you must touch base with your team, and after a while, my team's like, enough already. Like, we don't need to talk to you anymore. We're done with you. Like, please. And so you really need, once again, it's flexibility in terms of how many times you need to touch base. What do you need to touch base about? Like, do I spend like the first 5 minutes saying, how are the kids or whatever, or do people like, what? I only have half an hour. I just want to talk about work. Move
Mhm.
on, right? So, and then it could change from meeting to meeting, actually, right? And week to week, like you've had a bad week or whatever. So I think flexibility has got to be the key. So,
Now, if you can give advice to the next generation of leaders based on all your experience,
mhm.
what would you say?
Hmm. All generational leaders like give advice. Okay, so I think probably I've said it over and over again in terms of what we have to do.
Mhm.
Um, Even before COVID, but especially in COVID, flexibility is important, right? Flexibility, because obviously you have to work from home, you have the office, you have different ways of doing things, different staff need different things from you. So you just have to like move with it. You don't really have a hard line in terms of you must get this done. You also have to have flexibility in that. And that the other thing that you require in order to have that flexibility is perspective, right? So, on one hand, you could say everything has to be done brilliantly all the time. And of course, that's ideal,
Yeah.
but you have to say something's got to give. So,
Mhm.
this is more important than that. Let that go. Yes, you're late on that, but that's okay. This is more important. And then, especially in COVID, where people are really struggling with kids and dealing with aging parents and health issues, you just want to say, actually, that's not that important. The other thing about perspective, too, is that, we all like to think, I know this is going to be very unpopular, that we do important things for important companies, important causes, but it's all relative, right? I think what it comes down to, you really need to keep in mind what is really important. Your health, your family, your circle. as opposed to the job, because it is just a job, right? And you can pour your life and soul into it, but it's just a job, and you need to maintain that perspective. And because of that, I think I used to say is that I need to be able to look myself in the mirror every day at night and say I've done the right thing, as opposed to I've delivered on my goals, right? It's nice to be able to do both, but if you keep that in the back of your mind in terms of if you have a hard decision to make, in terms of I need to look at myself in the mirror, no one else needs to look at me, right? And so that is what you need to keep in mind when you're making some of these decisions.
Yeah, well, that's such a great perspective. Now, what do you think is the role or should be the role of leaders when it comes to driving diversity and inclusion in the workplace?
To lead. That's our job. So to plan, to resource, to drive. I think my perspective on corporate social responsibility has always kind of been the same, even though I've understood it differently over time. It's never been about a nice to have or being nice. Like everybody says, oh, it's all nice and fluffy. It isn't actually nice. It's a business imperative. I used to work at a bank, and one of the things is that when you looked at credit risk, they would actually assess whether or not the company had environmental policies and how they managed the environment. And it's not because the bank wanted to be green. It's because that actually adds to their cost of borrowing and their additional risk. So it's a business risk, right? And so, once again, being a good employer, that's not about being nice. It's about attracting the best and the brightest. And even supporting the community at the extreme level. It's not only good for business because people will recognize you, people give you the license to operate, but at the most crass and base level, if your community isn't thriving, who's going to be your customers, right? So you lift everybody up because they will become better customers ultimately, right? So everyone I've talked to, especially recently in terms of the D&I space, is that if you don't have the top leadership bought into what needs to get done, it won't get done.
Right.
So it's, you can have all the great committees and ERGs and everything you want, but you need your CEO and your top leadership to be really bought into it. So.
Now, balancing the mind and body is very important for leaders to keep going. What do you do to create the balance?
I'm really lucky because I normally am pretty good at compartmentalizing. So most of my career, I've been able to sleep at night. So I've been able to just, put my head down and go to sleep. What allows me to do that? I don't know. I don't know why I do that. Right now, what I'm blessed with is I have a dog, and he's 2.5 years old. And I don't know how people without pets are surviving in COVID, because he makes us go for walks because you can't stay at home. And he's cheeky, so he amuses us, and he makes you smile. So I think pets are really important. And unfortunately, with nothing else to do, our lives sort of revolve around the dog. So.
Now, any leadership books you would recommend that you feel are great from a leadership perspective?
So when you gave me that question, I'm like, I'm so embarrassed, but no, like I haven't read a book I can't even, like, it's embarrassing. I have a pile of economists building up that I never get to, and you don't get to any decent reading anymore. So I'm sorry, no.
I will say that 90% of the leaders gave me exactly the same answer, just so you know.
Okay, thank goodness. I was going to say, maybe I should Google some good leadership books so I can recommend them, but I'm like, I can't think of any. So it's terrible.
That is a common answer. Now, what would you then say is your leadership credo that you feel that you've been successful in executing?
Okay, so I did actually put some thought into this because at least you gave me the questions ahead of time. So you said 3 to 5. So I've actually come up with 5, if that's okay.
Yep.
First, deliver more than what they expect. Second, always do what you say you're going to do. Third, don't just take the first answer you're given. Fourth, be kind because you don't know what's going on in people's lives. And 5, have fun because life is too short.
That's awesome. I think after all these interviews, I'm going to have like 50 leadership credos.
I know.
Like, which one should I pick?
How am I going to live by all of them, right? So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, if you ever have a chance to write a book, based
Mhm.
on all your experience in giving back, what would you write about?
um, I would actually do vignettes. Probably, I change the names to, disguise the to protect the innocent
Mhm.
of sort of the different crazy things that have happened in my work life. That's all, and the things that I've experienced, which have been fun. Like, when you look back on things, they're fun. When you're living in them, you're like, oh my goodness. But it was. I think that would be kind of like just snapshots from the crazy world.
Mhm. Okay. Now, if we put you on the cover of Time magazine, what would you like it to say?
Oh, that was tough. That was tough. I wasn't sure what was it going to be. So, who would have thought?
Mhm.
That would be my title. So,
Yeah. Okay. Now, if I asked you for a quote that would be your legacy as a leader, what would you like that quote to be?
this is what I've done a couple of talks for some young students, and they often ask advice. And beyond be kind, I always say just give it a go.
Mhm.
And that's what I tell folks in my organization now. Like, we plan, and plan. I said, at some point now, just give it a go. Like, if it doesn't work, we'll fix it. Like, if it's not perfect, we'll fix it. Like, if it goes off right, we'll adjust, right? So don't be afraid to give it a go. And that applies to your career and trying different jobs and whatever.